This is the video review for LDCX Supertrain robot. I don't know what this robot is called, so I just call him Peacock. Here's a size comparison with some other robots. And here's how he looks with some other LDCX robots from Wave 2. So he technically only has one accessory, and it's this tiny gun right here. So that just fits in his hand with a 5mm peg. But it's very simple looking. It definitely doesn't scale very well with his body. It looks very tiny compared to how big he is. Pretty underwhelming. He has a really interesting head sculpt. It's very complicated looking. It's got a lot of parts to it. And then he's got these cool wings in the back. So the overall aesthetic is pretty interesting. His legs are very different from the standard LDCX robots, which look more like this. So his whole body is actually pretty different. The arms are also a lot thicker. And this guy is actually a 4-train combiner, so he has a lot more bulk than the other robots in the line. But overall, the aesthetic is really cool. And I'd say he's probably like an 8 for his robot aesthetic. His articulation is pretty standard for this line, which is a little limited. So he does have bicep swivel, he does have an elbow that comes about 90 degrees. He does have a shoulder that goes basically all the way around, but the wings block it. And then he has outward motion on the shoulder as well. He does not have any head articulation, which is standard with these figures. He does have some outward motion on the hips. He's got basically one click of outward motion, so you're not going to get much of an A stance from these figures. He does have a knee joint as well, but it's kind of pointless because his hips actually don't go forward or backwards, so you can't really get much out of this knee except for like this backwards, or just having him maybe look like he's walking. And then he does have like a little bit of ankle pivot, but since his legs don't spread that much, you actually don't need much ankle pivot. So transformation is where this guy has the most issues for me. Is unlike the other robots in this line, this guy is a really heavy parts former. So you start by removing his arm, and that's going to release this backpack section. And another reason that this robot is, well, I was going to say he's inferior to the other robots in this line, but because you can't part swap his parts, but I actually haven't tested it out, so let me do that before I decide that the playability is not there. So these are his arms. They're a lot bulkier than the other arms in the series. Okay, so after you pull off his arms, his whole wing backpack is going to come off. And then you just start pulling the rest of his body apart. So his legs actually have these giant shin guards in the front, and these just pull right off. And they're attached by these 2 clips here. So you have somewhat more standard looking legs, but then he's got these giant foot and ankle pieces which also pull off. And then his legs, these sections do come off like the standard LDCX robots. Okay, so I tested it out. This guy is cross compatible with the other LDCX robots, so you can limb swap them. And this is what he looks like as a more basic mode. So this here is my number one problem with this figure, is he actually separates into 10 pieces, so he's a heavy parts former, which I really don't enjoy. The other robots I could kind of give a pass, because their accessories were the parts forming most of it, and you could actually transform them to robot to train with just separating their arms. So most of them, you could separate them into 3 parts to transform them. This guy 10, which is a lot. Okay, so transforming the torso goes the same way as it always does. Is you fold in these pegs, push down the head, and then he's still got the auto transforming gimmick of the head popping out when you push in this chest. So this fake chest is just going to wrap over his head, and then this will basically clean it up. And then you fold in the hips and push those in place, and then these panels are going to fold up, and then you just push down the abs, and that finishes that off. And then you have this little panel back here, and that's basically how all the other LDCX torsos transform. Because these arms are so much thicker, usually the arms only have half the train front. These arms actually transform a lot differently than the other robots. So these arms are actually just going to fold up like this, and then the fist just pushes in. So really basic. And then the shin armor is just going to fold in half and then clip in place. And then the two thigh sections are just going to sandwich together. And the foot section is really obvious. The toes are just going to fold all the way in, and then the heel folds in, and that makes this section. Now you're going to take the arm piece, and you're going to connect that to the foot piece, and then you connect that to the shin armor. So I thought the side with all the screw holes would match together, but this actually doesn't mate. You have to actually peg the clean one on this side, which does not make sense, because now you have screw holes no matter which way you flip this. So that was a pretty bad design choice. Okay, and then you take the thigh section and you can connect that to the torso. So let's say that this guy is a 7-part combiner, because really the thighs could have stayed connected the whole time and you could transform him. Okay, I did forget about his gun, so you just push in the barrel, and this is actually going to fit in the thigh pieces. There's a recess, and then you sandwich them together. So actually I think, yeah, it would be hard to, I guess you can still put the gun in without taking these off of the torso. Okay, and then my least favorite part is the wing backpack is just kind of a mess. It's got a lot going on, so obviously you're going to streamline all these feathers and then fold in these clear red bits. And this is actually made of 2 separate pieces, so you do need to disconnect these. Okay, so that comes off there. And then you have this piece, which you just put off to the side for now. And then you just have to, because this piece has so many different joints, it gets really confusing on how it's supposed to all fold up. So I'm just going to play with it, because I haven't transformed this guy for a while. So this harness here folds here, and that cleans that part up like that. So same thing on the other side, and then that's going to allow this to fold up, which just leaves you with this piece. So now that the feathers are all aligned, you just rotate that into place and then make the roof of the train here with these panels, and then peg that all together. And then you take this section, and then you're going to use these clips and clip everything back together. Okay, and there's how the train looks like in its 4-train combiner. Like I said, it was a really weird choice that they mixed up the screw holes. Some are on this side, some are on this side, so you can't even get like one clean side of the train, which is really unfortunate. And it looks like that carries over through the whole train. They just divided the screw holes half on one side, half on the other side. So none of the sides end up looking clean. Actually, this side looks clean. And this side has all the screw holes. But for all the other components of the train, half the screw holes are on one side, half are on the other side. And I thought that was my mistake, but it's clearly not, because this is the forearm section. This is all one train section. So the screw holes are just half and half. And then of course you have these joints, so if you want your train to be posable. You're going to connect the cabins using these joints, which are pretty ugly looking and really destroy the illusion. They should have made these joints like a lot smaller and more streamlined. But if you connect the train without those connectors, you get this nice streamlined looking train, which is about 36 inches. So the alt mode is pretty nice. It's definitely not as good as the other ones because you can't display it in a way where all the screw holes are on the far side where you don't see them. So I would say this alt mode actually suffers a lot from that choice. I'd say the alt mode is probably an 8, especially with these holes in the top. It could have definitely looked a lot better. The paint is very nice though, and the little paint work for the insignias. And then for the fun factor, this figure just has too much parts forming. So really, I don't enjoy this figure at all. I'm probably going to get rid of him. So for the fun factor, I'd definitely say this figure is kind of a 5. It's just a lot of hassle for the transformation. But if that's something you don't mind, I'm going to put the link in the description so that you can order your own from Sir Toys. And the quality of these figures is still a good solid 8. It's got a couple of little fiddly weird things, but the plastic is good quality and it's definitely worth the price point.